Hi, so I realized that I've never really introduced myself, but my name is Brooke. And so I chose the first option about this week's, and I chose to choose an age and just kind of apply all the different theories to it and how me and someone else were at that age too. And I really thought that this week's stuff was kind of interesting, and I had also learned about all this stuff when I was in sociology. And so I thought it was kind of interesting to learn about it kind of from a psychology perspective. But I chose age 15, and I chose it because my brother just turned 16, and so I kind of like know how he was at 15, and then I know that I acted a lot different than he did at age 15. And so the first theory is the psychosexual theory of development, and it was created by Sigmund Freud, and he believed that our personality developed when we were a child, and that our childhood experiences shaped how our personality was and how we behaved as an adult. And he believed that our development was discontinuous and that we have to pass through stages, but if we can't pass through a stage, we get stuck. And there are 5 stages, and they're like associated with what children's urges are focused on, and like it's like a certain body part. And so the oral stage is birth to 1 year old, and the anal stage is 1 year to 3 years, and the phallic stage is 3 to 6 years, and the latent stage is 6 to puberty, and then the genital stage is puberty to adulthood. And so at age 15, my brother was like just finishing puberty, or and so he's at like the very end of that latent stage, and it kind of makes sense because during the latent stage is where you put your sexual energy into like school or work or like other extracurricular activities. And at age 15, he just had no interest in girls, and he would put all of his energy into his dirt bikes, into skiing and soccer. And then when I would ask him about girls, he was like, what are you talking about? Like, I just go ride my dirt bike. And at age 15, I was done with puberty, and all of my interest was just like centered into boys. So we were very different in that development. And the next theory is psychosocial theory of development, and it was created by Erik Erikson. And he believed that your personality develops in your whole life. And he talked about how we interact with each other affects our sense of self. And there are 8 stages of life, and when we go through those stages, we need to achieve a certain competence to like so that like you're not affected by certain things when you pass the stage. I'll explain it, it'll make sense. And so from birth to 12 months, the infant needs to develop a sense of trust. And so if the caretaker is loving and nurturing and pays attention to the baby and the needs, they'll develop that sense of trust with the individual, with the world. But if they don't, if the caretaker is very hands-off and doesn't really like pay attention to the needs of the child will end up with like anxiety and fear and like mistrust in the caretaker and the world in general. And so in age 1 to 3, the individual needs to achieve autonomy. And so that's why a lot of the kids, at this age are like, no, I want to do it. Like, let me do it. You don't need to help me, And so they just want to be able to like achieve that, like their own, that they can do on their own. And if they don't do that, then they're going to end up with shame and doubt and not very good like self-confidence. And so at ages 3 to 6, the individual needs to be able to like initiate activities and complete them and do well in them and stuff, or else they're going to end up just with guilt and self-doubt and stuff like that. And then in year 6 to 12, this is when like kids start to compare their grades with each other, and when they like start to understand if they're like smart or not and stuff like that, and they need to be able to pass through that stage, or else they're going to end up just like feeling less than others. And yeah. And then in 12 to 18, it's when like all the individuals in that stage are trying to find their identity, and that's why like people are really experimenting with who they are and like trying to find out like who they are. And if they pass through that and they can't really find it out, then they end up with like role confusion. And then in the 20s to the early 40s, it's when they're trying to find intimacy instead of isolation. And then in the 40s to mid 60s, it's when they're trying to find generativity versus stagnation. Like they just need to find activities to do so they just don't feel like they have no purpose in life, And then in the 60s on, it's when they're trying to find integrity in their life instead of despair. And so at age 15, we would be in the identity versus role confusion kind of stage. And my brother exercised his role by being assertive and really hard to control for like my mom. And when I was 15, I was trying to find myself by like going through a lot of different friend groups and just trying to find like a good fit for me. And then the next theory is cognitive theory of development, and it was created by Jean Piaget. I don't know how to say it. And he believed that your cognitive abilities develop through different stages. And from birth to age 2 is your sensory motor stage, and it's when the child begins to like know the world through like actions and just through its senses and stuff. And then age 2 to 7 is the operational stage, and it's where children begin to think symbolically and they use words and pictures to represent objects. And then in ages 7 to 11, it's the concrete operational stage, and children begin to think logically. And then in the age 12 and up is the formal operational stage, and the individuals begin to think abstractly and use reason. And so at age 15, my brother and I were both able to think abstractly and use reason, but obviously ideas that would go through his head and he would be like, oh yeah, that's so good. They were usually risky, had to do with his dirt bike usually. The next theory was the theory of moral development by Lawrence Kohlberg, and there's 3 levels to this development. And in level 1, it's the pre-conventional morality level. And in stage 1, it's obedience and punishment. And so your behavior is driven by avoiding punishment. And then in stage 2 is individual interest, and your behavior is driven by self-interest and rewards. And then in level 2 is conventional morality, and there's stage 3, which is interpersonal, and so your behavior is driven by social approval. And then in stage 4, your behavior is driven by obeying authority and conforming to social order. And then in level 3 is post-conventional morality, and there's stage 5, which your behavior is driven by balance of social order and individual rights. And then stage 6, your behavior is driven by internal moral principles. And so at age 15, my brother was mostly just interested in his own needs, and he would just work towards rewards. And then at age 15, my behavior was driven by my mother's authority, and so I would just listen to her and just conform to all of her rules and stuff. And so I just thought this was really cool how you learned all these different ways and how they like actually kind of like made sense. I kind of agree most with the psychosocial theory of development because it kind of really made sense through all the stages of what these people are searching for. I mean, obviously it might not work for every single person, but I think in general it's did a pretty good job. And so my question is, what theory do you think makes the most sense to you and about how you developed?